Hello again, welcome to Herd Immunity News. I'm Marcus Botzer. Today I have the great pleasure in welcoming back once again Mr. Dave Holland. Dave was the Reform Party candidate in the by-election that we just had in Mid Bedfordshire, and he's going to tell us a bit about his experience. We're going to go on and discuss many other things, what's going on in British politics, the international situation, where Reform go from here, looking at next year's election or even early 2025. Let's not think about that, folks. But without further ado, can I just say, Dave, how are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. I think I'm just about recovered from the mental trials of the by-election.
Yeah, for anybody that's not stood or been part of an election, it is a very draining process. But just tell us about your experience and we'll go from there.
Okay, well, Mid Bedfordshire was unusual in that most by-elections are a 6-week sprint, and you achieve everything you've got to do. 6 weeks, most people can kind of manage flat out, doing everything you can do. The problem we had was because of Nadine resigning without resigning at the beginning of June, we didn't know when the by-election was going to be. All we knew that we'd got more time to get things done. So we hit the ground running, and I think it was 134 days straight of campaigning, without a day off, without a chance to recover from blisters and nibbled fingers and all the things that go with it. And we got to the 6-week mark and I was physically exhausted. Just so when they actually said, yeah, the by-election's in 6 weeks' time, I thought, oh, that's going to be interesting then, because I had to dig deep to find the energy just to put one foot in front of the other for a while. And then you kind of just run on adrenaline, which keeps you going, but it takes twice as much out of you as just normal activity. So after the by-election, I just collapsed and slept for a couple of days because it was physically exhausting. Hats off to Alistair Strathern, because he was doing similar, I feel certain. Maybe he paced himself a bit better than I did, but he had to go through the whole becoming an MP process, which it actually occurred to me. I thought, well, I haven't really left enough in the tank. I'd really, rather than doing interviews all the next day after the by-election, there was a part of me that just wanted to sleep. So, yeah, I learned quite a lot about how to pace yourself and how to manage your own physical capabilities and endurance, because I hit it far too hard because I'm like that. And with a normal by-election in 6 weeks, you can do that, I think. But because we had no end date, I didn't know when it was, what opportunity we had in front of us to achieve everything we wanted to achieve. As it was, we knocked 40,000 doors. It wasn't the 55,000 that I wanted to get done. So we didn't have enough time. But it was still a hell of an achievement. I'd love to know how many the other parties did, because I can't imagine it was many more than us.
Well, just for our viewers and listeners, Dave, I'll go over the 2023 Mid Bedfordshire by-election results. Labour actually won this seat incredibly with just under 14,000 votes. That's 34.1% of the election share. Festus Akin Busar was second for the Conservatives. He had 31% of the vote. But overall, that was a loss of nearly 29% in the vote share. Yourself, you did a fantastic job in relation to results that Reform had in other by-elections, if I can just compare like for like, because you're still a new party. So let's just be honest and realistic. For the stages of by-elections, it's normally about the incumbent and the opposition. Liberal Democrats came in third with 23% of the vote. An independent called Gareth Mackay, who's been a councillor, an independent councillor in that area, he's quite a popular guy, came fourth, and he just pipped you to the 5th spot. But overall, were you disappointed? Were you, did you feel that you could have done a lot better? Was there much left on the field?
Yes, well, our initial goal was if we could hit 8 to 12%, we
Right.
would blow it. That was our target, to show a significant jump in our support and by-election results. At the time, I thought it was more than achievable.
Mm.
It turns out the squeeze in the last week, the Tories did an incredible job. I thought I'd got 5,500 votes,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up with 1,489, which was the most we've received in a by-election. But in the last week, the Tories hit the phones and they were ringing up their voters,
Mm-hmm.
reminding them of, the perils of a Labour government, of having a Labour MP. And I received phone calls afterwards saying, many phone calls afterwards saying, look, I told you I'd vote for you. I wanted to vote for you, but Festus rang up in the last week and scared me back into the tribalism of the past. And I'm really sorry. I feel bad for it now. I'll never do it again. I'm going to vote for you in the general. But, I got scared and did what I did. So they did a wonderful job. And we were pretty much out of ammunition by that point in time. Without the machinery in place yet of the big parties, with the budget I had, we did most of our heavy lifting in the weeks from June up till September, and thought, well, we've built ourselves a base. That's the core of our base, and we had to kind of cross our fingers and hope that it stuck with us.
Mm.
I personally didn't appreciate Richard and Tyson and Paul Oakton, our CEO,
Yes.
said, you are going to get hugely squeezed in the last week or so. Mm-hmm. They're going to take or try and take back whatever you've accumulated. And, how we deal with that is a question for debate. So like I said, because of our resources, which are a lot more limited than theirs, we were sort of out of ammunition in the last 7 to 10 days. Which is part of the growing process, I suppose, and part of the whole fundraising and infrastructure and volunteers and everything else.
Sure.
So we kind of had to accept that squeeze, but it was heartbreaking at the time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Because I thought, it's very strange when you're knocking doors. And you can tell the difference between somebody who says, yeah, I'll vote for you. See, I've got to go. I'm taking the kids out. And someone who says, I'll vote for you because you delivered a leaflet last summer. And in it said that. And I totally agree with that. And so I walked away thinking that's a real vote. That's going to be a vote for me. And those were the ones we were counting. And I thought they were fairly solid, solid support. But there is, it turns out, a massive difference between what people want and what people are afraid of. And that fear is the bit that needs overcoming. I mean, I think it's subsiding now anyway, because we've pretty much got a socialist government. We've had one for the last 5 years. Indeed. So, the fear of a socialist government with no money to spend is subsiding, I think.
Indeed. I can relate to it myself because I have run in a general election, 2019. I ran for the Brexit Party in an election. I did the hustings, knocked doors, did a lot of campaigning, same as yourself. So I do understand the hangover effect emotionally, because you invest so much of yourself into it, but you come out the other end much better and stronger for it. But can I just take you back a little bit into what you just said, please, Dave? You said that the Conservatives did a great job. And that's quite amazing, considering that they lost nearly 30% of the vote share from last time. So without Festus, the candidate, investing everything that he did, they probably would have done a lot worse than that.
When we were canvassing, nobody was admitting. I had maybe a dozen people admit they were going to vote Conservative.
Wow.
Yes, it was non-existent. Everybody on the doorstep was saying, I'm a Tory, but I can't vote Conservative anymore.
Yeah.
Or rather, I'm a Conservative, but I can't vote Tory anymore.
Mm.
Um, so we were, on our numbers, we were expecting them to get 50 or 60% of what they ended up with. So when I say he did a good job, they did a good job. They are a very formidable election winning machine. Now, I know they didn't win this election, but
past tense.
He got damn close to it, despite everything that the party have done to the public in the last.
But to be fair, it's a Conservative, it's one of the strongest Conservative seats in the United Kingdom. And he was, you know, you're looking at a 60% share of the vote when Nadine Dorries was elected, down to under half of that. That's a complete disaster in anyone's book.
Yes, but if you take out, there are 25,000 Tory voters in Mid Bedfordshire who stayed at home.
Yeah, the turnout was 45%, was it? Something like that, 44.
So there's the Labour vote went down 5,000. The Tory vote went down 25,000.
Yeah, there you go.
Now the question is, come the general election, what are those 25,000 going to do?
I'll give you that, but not 30%. No chance. I'll give you half of that. And most pollsters would give you half of that. When you look at the history of electoral swings from by-election results, which is really, it's a smack on the backside to say you're not doing good enough. But in a seat like Mid Bedfordshire, I mean, how many times has that been a Labour seat since the beginning of
Never.
Exactly. Never.
It's been a Tory seat, a safe Tory seat for 91 years.
There we are. So that for us, it was the writing is on the wall for the Conservatives at the next general election. I don't know if you saw the Telegraph at the weekends where polling expert Sir John Milford, I think his name is, from Strathclyde University, he basically said the Tories will be lucky to get 130 seats, and maybe they won't get 200 seats. This will be a wipeout, similar to the Blair 1997 election. What do you put into that, just as the Conservatives are concerned? Do you expect obliteration at the next election?
Yes, but it's very... There was Tony Blair, whether you love him or hate him. I was probably in the latter, well, I am in the latter camp, built an expectation and a following in the run-up to 1997 that painted a vision of the future that people could buy into. We are not in that same place now. And yet Labour are polling at the same sort of ratios. So, but not because they've got support, because the Tory support has collapsed. And I think, as Boris proved, that you can turn that whole situation round in 6 months. Whether you can do it repeatedly, because I think the public are becoming a little more skeptical about the truths and the untruths being told by parties to get elected. But Boris proved in 6 months you can turn around a party that had struggled to get a majority and get it an 80-seat majority. So,
but sorry to interrupt you again, but really the 2019 election, if I can put it to you, was probably the second referendum. And let's look at, of course, you have to factor in Jeremy Corbyn, probably the most unelectable Labour leader in history. You've got to factor that in.
Except that up against Theresa May, he got 40% of the vote.
True, but she still won.
But by the narrowest...
And she fudged Brexit completely.
Yes, but what I'm saying is 40% of the vote, if Jeremy Corbyn can attract 40% of the vote, then, you say he's the most unelectable, but we'd be thrilled with attracting 40% of the vote right now.
Yeah, but you can't compare Labour's history to Reform's history. There's no way you can do that. But Boris says you have to factor that into the 2019 results.
Yes,
I think Mrs. May was so hated within the Conservative Party because she's not a Conservative; she's a Lib Dem at best.
Yes,
Boris is insane.
50% of the Tory party are Liberals.
Well, indeed. And for a lot of people looking for a centre-right alternative party, you do hit the top of the tree when it comes to it. We've spoken to people, we've got followers who are very sceptical, and that's the right to they're sceptical of all these splinter factors in. But if I'm being totally honest with you, I'll put it to you, is it fair to say that Nigel Farage is probably the most influential politician from the centre-right in the UK?
I'd say he's the most influential politician in the UK from either side. He's had more impact on British politics in the last 25 years than any other human being. Probably had more impact on British politics since Thatcher. And that's without ever getting elected. Imagine what he'll do when he gets elected.
Well, this is being touted. This takes me on to what's being touted. I was at I was at the Reform Party annual conference this year, just off Edgware Road. Very kind to be accepted along as a minnow in the media circles. I was given access to interview Richard Tice, your leader, Ben Habib. Well, I only chatted briefly with Ben. I met yourself and a few other people. Noel Wilcox as well, great friend of our channel. There's a lot of amazing work defeating Sadiq Khan, albeit a small skirmish or a small battle won in the war, the ULEZ wars. But looking at what happened at the Conservative Party conference when Nigel turned up, he was treated like a king. He really is the #1 man when it comes to centre-right voters in this country. Where does Nigel go from here? Because right now he's a star.
Yes.
Where does he go politically from here?
See, obviously I can't speak for Nigel.
No.
My feelings are this. Nigel does everything with a purpose. He is an incredibly effective politician. And I was curious when he decided to go in the jungle because I thought it could have backfired on him.
It could.
If he'd have been voted out first, for example.
Yes.
In a way it was edited.
Or had constant rows with the other contestants about Brexit and shouted and screamed at them and lost his bottle and his rag.
And for him, he was constantly at the mercy of the ITV editing team who could paint, they can paint people and take snippets out of conversations however they want to take them. So I personally consider it to be a bit of a gamble, but Nigel's quite a clever man and he understands media and he understands people. And so, you have to, I have the utmost trust in his judgment and his ability to achieve what he wants to achieve. Now, why would he's got a media career and his own show on TV News. Why would he go through the jungle to raise his profile when he's already got a profile? It looks to me like something else is afoot. And I personally think he's going to re-engage, whether it's now or whether it's in 27, 28, in readiness for the general election after that. Who knows? I mean, the Reform Party plan is a long-term strategy with a view to aiming at 2029 as where we believe we're going to, really put our marker in the ground.
Sure.
That said, we seem to be ahead of schedule at the moment. So it's a fluid plan. It's all down to Nigel and what he thinks
it is.
Will, he's dedicated to a cause. I can totally understand after 25 years of dragging the country to where it is, or to, getting Brexit over the line. He was totally entitled to, and I did 134 days of it and it broke me. I don't know how you do 25 years of it constantly in the media, and he's an incredible man. So I understand him wanting to have a breather from politics. Where will he come back in the next? I mean, I'll be inclined at the moment to think he'll be ready to. I mean, he's a wonderful speaker and a wonderful mouthpiece for centre-right politics, and he would be an asset to our team if he comes back on board. It would be incredible for us because he gets airtime and he gets in papers and he gets us publicity and the press that we need.
Indeed, all of that's true. Can I put a scenario to you? Now, there have been talks and chats that Nigel may well be ready to rejoin the Conservative Party, even though I was in the room when he said that he was committed to reform and he could never join a Conservative Party that weren't Conservatives. They were more like Labour than Labour. However, in the scenario of the Conservatives being completely wiped out at the next election and realising that the betrayal of Brexit, open border immigration, massive taxation, state intervention, basically being as Labour could be under New Labour. Is there a situation where you feel that there may well be an armistice against all those Brexiteers and they may go back to the Conservative Party with new leadership like Suella Braverman? I appreciate there's a lot in there. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yes, I mean the wonderful thing about British politics, if you can describe it like that, I mean, you take your hair out 1 minute, and then the next minute you wonder what's going to happen.
All gone.
Because I think the next few months are going to be very interesting. I think discussions of Nigel going back to the Tories and getting involved, running the party, becoming the leader, doing whatever, I think are just headlines to sell newspapers and not a lot more. I personally can't see that happening. I think Nigel's got bigger ambitions than rescuing the Tory party. I don't think that's on his list of things to do at all. But I'm not speaking for Nigel. He made it clear at our conference that that is not where his heart lies. And I think if he re-engages with politics, it'll be with the Reform Party. In what capacity, I'm not sure. Because we have some wonderful leadership, and we have the wonderful thing about Reform is that we are a very united, focused, cohesive group of like-minded souls. We don't have the broad church, which I think they mean, there's some liberals and some socialists in there as well, which a party either stands for something or it doesn't. And we have a like-minded group of people, and I think Nigel has fit into that group rather well.
Well, the thing about the broad church, I've always found it's a bit of a cop-out, and it's heavily spun, because you've got people within the Conservative Party who are not conservative. It's so broad a church, it's not a church. It's a shopping mall for ideas, and it absolutely goes nowhere. And these broad church statements, if I may say, Dave, the broader your church, the more divided you are, and the less likely that you're going to have success working together. And you have all these infighting and in-bitching. And I appreciate that there is that in every party. People have careers, and the Reform will be the same to a lesser extent because they're not in power yet. They're not in office. But from talking with, interviewing your leader, Richard Tice, your candidate for London Mayor, Howard Cox, your good self, Ben Habib, of course, the deputy leader, you can see that they have replaced completely what we used to know as voters as the Conservative Party. And that's what people want. They don't want this facsimile, a weak, flimsied imitation, something that you would buy down the market. Instead of Chanel, you're getting some, toilet duck in a bottle shaken up with a label saying Chanel. I mean, I think you guys are really on the precipice of doing very well, but there are big questions to be answered. And is that a fair assessment of where you're at?
Yes, I mean the general election, whenever it happens, is going to be interesting. I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. It'll either be forced upon us in the coming few days. I don't see how they can have another replacement of leader without something of a
election.
yes. So I think we could end up with a general election as early as February, in my opinion, which would be interesting.
You better recover quick.
Yeah. Having said that, no, having said that, it's probably more likely in the spring. Will they want I mean, the local election results for the Tories are going to be dire again. So will they want that 6 months before a general? Probably not. So do it on the same day sort of makes sense to limit that damage and the optics of that. But there's so much that could happen. The Party of Islam, for example, got rejected as an application, but I can see that being returned and set up. Now, potentially that's 5 million votes that Labour could lose. If Labour, that knocked Labour down to 7 million, which is sort of where the Tories are going to be. We're going to be, nibbling. Yes, we've got to double our vote share, but it's looking like we could get close to doing that in the next few months. If we start getting up high teens, low 20s polling, all of a sudden it becomes a 3-4 way battle. And that becomes interesting.
It does. Just to touch on some of the excellent stuff you're saying there, we're facing, Sunak is going to be facing a vote on Rwanda, his Rwanda policy. That's a complete farce, a complete joke when you look at it. It can maybe take, Rwandans maybe say, just to go quick one over it, they could take 100 to 200 people and we get that in an afternoon. So that's that taken care of. There's estimates it could cost 160,000 per person. And for every person we send over there to Rwanda, we'll have to take an undisclosed number. So we could actually end up with more people net on the back of the Rwanda policy. And already it's cost between 150 and 200 million. But
it gets even better than that, because any of the people that we send there,
yes,
if they break a law in Rwanda,
yes,
they automatically come back here.
Exactly.
So if you were one of the unlucky ones that got sent to Rwanda, you'll just go shoplifting for the afternoon.
Yeah.
And you're back in the UK anyway. So what sort of deterrent is this craziness?
It's none. It's actually an incentive for more people to come across.
Yes.
In real terms. And already Sunak's paid up front. That's like you going to your gardener or your local builder and say, will you build me a lovely gazebo in the back? He said, yes, of course I will, Dave. That's going to be 100G up front. There's the money. And you end up with a one-man tent in the back garden. The man's clueless, and we need 26 Conservative MPs. This is big, big stuff. If 26 Conservative MPs vote against him, this is going to be the first time that a sitting Prime Minister has lost passing a bill through on the second reading since 1986.
Yes.
I mean, this is massive news. All he needs is 57 abstainees, and you could be looking at that election.
Yeah, I don't know how many letters have gone in yet, but it must be more than 26, I would have thought so far. So we're in the ballpark of having a very interesting Tuesday evening.
No, we are. And I think you're absolutely right in your prediction. After the decimation of the Conservative Party, they will lose so many more voters, and they will have nowhere else to go apart from yourselves. I have to mention as well the Heritage Party. I mentioned Reclaim. I mentioned the others, but viewers and listeners and voters can make up their own minds, and it's up to you guys to set out your stall.
Yeah, well, we're quite fortunate. I say fortunate. I think we've worked hard. We're the only ones that are featuring on polls.
True.
I get quite a lot of emails and letters from people saying, Reform ought to join forces with all the other, right-wing
like
parties.
An alliance.
Yeah, and form an alliance with UKIP and with Reclaim and with Heritage is broadly similar and blah blah blah, and we all ought to join together. But all of a sudden, we'd become a broader church with an awful lot of leaders of those parties that would want to be involved with the leadership of reform, and we'd lose a lot of our cohesiveness in exchange for gaining less than 0.1% in the poll. So they're not bringing much to the party in terms of support, but potentially we'd lose our family essence that is the we fit when reform candidates meet. And at our conference, or we had a candidates thing the other day, it's like a family event.
Yeah.
Everybody's on the same page. Everyone feels like they're part of something special. And that needs, especially at this stage, I think that needs to be protected and looked after, because it's more important than, inviting division. People keep saying to me about, what if there were Tory defections? Would you have Tories come across? And my first question would be, which ones? Who would you want? Now, are they coming across because they want to break us in the same way they broke their own party?
Yeah, that's a good point.
They're not necessarily, okay, maybe, to pick a few off the top of my head, John Redwood.
Yeah.
Is a classic small C conservative.
Sure.
And then I'll start running out of names.
Mark Francois?
Yeah, I quite like Mark.
What about the good old Lee Anderson?
No.
Well, there you go. The cat's amongst the pigeons. There's a lot of deal breakers for a lot of people, and we've got our Herd Immunity News channel has we're getting up to about 42,000 followers. So we're coming along. We're not, massive, but we are coming along, and we love our followers, viewers, and listeners. And because we called ourselves Herd Immunity, people obviously linked that up to the massive elephant in the room. We've got the COVID inquiry going on right now, but to COVID, to the lockdowns, to the ideology that was very similar to Brexit, because we were handing over our national sovereignty onto a unelected body and group of, in the main, leftist, socialist technocrats. Now, the reactions that we get when we have people on from the Reform Party is they say, oh, this, that, and the next thing. Yeah, they're good. Yeah, they're this, yeah, they're that. But, and I've spoken to David Bull about this, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, but when it comes to vaccinations, this really is a powder keg. It really is a powder keg, and how to address this, because it's a massive issue that we can't. Excess deaths, Dave, is a massive issue that cannot be ignored. But in strategic terms, I'll finish up on this. I'll shut up. But in strategic terms, I'd say there's only a small fraction of the electorate that will be swung either way on this issue. Over to you.
Yes, I mean, as I said, COVID's an interesting one because there's a cognitive dissonance attached to whether you've had the vaccines or not. I can understand people who, once you've had the vaccine, you kind of had the vaccine. So I can understand why people want to argue for its validity. People don't like to admit that they're wrong, even,
Yes.
If the evidence points in the other direction.
Yes. Right now, we have the COVID inquiry going on, and there are mixed opinions on this, but there is a general consensus to say that this is a non-COVID inquiry, that they're not asking the right pertinent questions. Give us your impressions on what you think of the COVID inquiry so far, Dave.
The only question they seem to be asking is, why didn't we lock down sooner? Who can we blame for this? Rather than asking the real questions, which is, how can we save more lives next time? I mean, it looks to me, if you were to say what went wrong with our COVID response, there are a few key things. I would say one of them is taking people out of hospitals and putting them in care homes that didn't have COVID in them. I mean, we could have, imagine a world where we ring-fenced care homes, the staff stayed in them, and maybe we had the military deliver supplies to them so that they remained ring-fenced and COVID-free until the vaccine turned up. Now, maybe the vaccine is, if you're 75 or 80 and you've got a few comorbidities, then the vaccine was probably your best bet, because it stopped you dying from COVID, maybe. It seems to give everyone COVID from what I can work out, but that's beside the point. I think if you're in the danger group and you are of a certain age and you had respiratory comorbidities, then it was probably your best bet. And so that would have helped people. The decisions they made to, no, let's put a load of sick people in with a load of healthy people who've got comorbidities and are at risk, but it's okay because we'll just send a load of midazolam in there and they can all go on the Liverpool pathway. I mean, that's not a solution in my book. And I personally think people should go to jail for that decision.
Indeed, should they be asking the question that Michael Gove tried to explore as to where, in fact, the COVID virus originated from?
Yes, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why he was asking that question, whether he was doing it in order to be able to apportion blame or in order to prevent another virus escaping. I mean, we've had deadly viruses being cultivated, manipulated, and tested at Porton Down for decades and decades and decades.
He wanted it to be, when speaking with Hugo Keith, KC, he wanted that to be included in the decision-making process because, as Gove put it, in order for them to plan around a virus, they need to know where it's come from. But the fact that Hugo Keith was completely disinterested in it because it didn't meet the terms of reference shows you, to your original point, I'll put it to you, it may well show you that this inquiry is a farce, that it's so tight in its terms of reference, you're not even going to learn where it came from.
Yes, but think of how many lawyers it's saving from starving.
Oh, that's true.
See, you're thinking about this COVID inquiry in totally the wrong viewpoint. Imagine this COVID inquiry is eat out to help out for barristers. This is how they can, because barristers are having a hard time.
I'm ashamed. Sorry, Dave. I take that back. Yeah, I'm ashamed. I'm going to commit Harry after this.
It's either a money laundering exercise. I mean, how can an inquiry cost? Was it $250 million now they're up to?
This week, yes.
This is for people to sit in a room and discuss how they could deal with a COVID pandemic better next time. $250 million. Who's charging them all that money? It's obviously lawyers.
Yes.
But how many lawyers does everyone need?
Well, have you seen the backdrop to the case? All those people, there's about 30 people sitting at computers doing nothing. They're probably on dating sites.
Yeah. For what purpose?
Well,
none of it makes sense. But they're not actually, as you so accurately said, they're not discussing the bits that are important for people.
Yeah.
How would we deal with it next time? I mean, it is the first time in history that we've locked up healthy people.
Absolutely.
And, the majority of healthy people were not at risk. The vast, vast majority. There were a few that I suspect had underlying conditions they didn't know about. But it was, in essence, if you look at the excess mortality for 21, it was no greater than 5 other years in the last 2 decades since the turn of the century. We've had 5 years without COVID that had higher all-cause excess mortality. So it wasn't exceptional by any stretch of the imagination. Locking people up thinking that they were going to in some way avoid a virus was also fairly stupid. I appreciate they were trying to slow it down so the NHS could cope, but the NHS was never under stress. The reason I say that is because they stopped doing everything else. The problem we've got with our waiting list now and the NHS in crisis now was all caused by the fact that they stopped dealing with everything during COVID and spent their time rehearsing dance routines instead.
Can I put it to you that we have a massive problem I think we discussed this last time, within the civil service, that they're actually the ones running the show. If you factor in the civil service and the courts, they were the same people who frustrated Brexit. But is it fair to say they're also the people who orchestrated Britain's functions and decisions during the COVID era?
Yes. Well, I suspect that we had once you decide to govern by focus group and govern by lobbyist
Or
and
SAGE,
yeah,
Imperial College London. These are the
yes,
people that are calling the shots.
but you pick your experts
Yes.
and then are they picking their experts to make the best decisions, or are they picking their experts so that they've got somebody to blame later? It strikes me that they're not picking their experts because, not all experts agree. And how you pick your experts is actually the challenge to good management.
Mm.
There's a lot of advice you can garner from all over the world, but if you choose the wrong advisor, you end up with the wrong outcome. Now, it strikes me that the experts were chosen as somebody to scapegoat rather than because they were going to offer the best advice. That's how it looks to me from the outside.
Well, what Mrs. Thatcher used to do was have 12 people in the room, so-called experts. 6 would say they want to go left. The other 6 would say we want to go right, and she'd let them scrap it out.
Yes.
That way she could make a balanced judgment and a balanced decision, because without hearing both sides of the argument, how the hell can you make a balanced argument and a balanced judgment? So from Boris Johnson's point of view, if I can ask you the question, originally he wanted to go for herd immunity, natural immunity, learned immunity, because in the back of Boris's brain, if I can invite you to step inside Boris's brain for a second, where your wellies, it's wet. Was he originally correct? And did he miss his Churchill moment? Was to go against all these other people and say, I'm sorry, we're not going to lock down. We're going to be like Sweden, and we're going to stay on course, look after the vulnerable, look after those with comorbidities. After all, we knew after 5 or 6 months of data that people dying from COVID were actually older than people dying from everything else.
Yes.
They were 84, the average mortality rate of those passing away from COVID. And the average age of everybody else not dying from COVID was 83. Well, obviously, so many people were assigned to COVID. But anyway, did Boris miss his Churchill moment?
Yes, but I think it's been a long time since we've had a Churchillian character. I would say that Maggie Thatcher was the last one who knew her own mind and was prepared to follow it. Since then, we have had a morass of mediocrity, and it sort of coincides with politics becoming a career instead of a vocation. I grew up thinking that people became politicians to share their experience and their expertise in running the country for the betterment of everybody. I might have been idealistic in that belief, but that's how people come out of industry and out of business and out of the corporate world and share their expertise, their understanding, their decision-making abilities and prowess on the big stage, as it were, to help shape. That's how I perceived the country and how I perceived governments to be formed. But now people come straight from university. They've got zero experience in anything. And they become spads, and then they become politicians. And here we are, mired in a massive mediocrity. And it would have been a wonderful opportunity. And fundamentally, herd immunity is what has kept us alive for millions of years. Yeah. It's only been the last 100 years that human beings have felt arrogant enough to dabble with biology. And in my mind, the jury is still out in some regards as to how successful they've been. It seems to me every time we make one solution through our dabblings, we create 100 others. Look at the pill, for example, liberated women, gave us control over childbirth. But now we've got male fertility rates dropping because of the estrogen levels in the water caused by the pill. So have we actually moved forwards as a species, or have we created more problems than we had before? You know, testosterone rates are dropping in men. Is that because estrogen is prevalent in our water? And they can't even answer simple questions like that on something that is set in stone. That's fine. It's not causing any problems, except it is causing problems. So then the NHS has to spend many, many, tens of hundreds of millions of pounds on artificial insemination and IVF programs and all that kind of stuff to try and rectify a problem that we've already caused, that we caused in the first place. So does mankind solve problems, or does he just make more problems to be solved later on?
All of that's true, and it's terrifying to look into that vacuum, that joyless, vacuumous, cultureless, spiritless United Kingdom that we have under the technocratic rule. And these people, when they wore their masks and they looked at you, that you were seeing dead eyes. I'm thinking of Valance, I'm thinking of Whitty, Matt Hancock, Van Tam. I hate to remind you of these characters because they really have to take at some point responsibility. The COVID inquiry, as we know it right now, is a sham. It's a farce. As you've just said, I agree with you. But look, taking on to another subject, and we'll finish up on this. This is a subject of national pride and being patriotic to your country and loving your country. This seems to be now a crime. To hold a St. George's cross after a rugby game can get you arrested. But to wave a Palestinian flag calling for the death of, say, for example, the Jewish race, this seems to be okay in our nation's capital. We're seeing that there is a wave of hatred for everything British and everything that's been part of our history, warts and all. Immigration is up to 750,000 per year on our current trajectory. Our demographics are being completely altered, Dave, changed whether we like it or not. If you want diversity, you want more of one thing than another. You want equality, so that means you've got your thumb on the scale if you're the wrong colour, and in this case seems to be white. What would you do as an MP to redress this balance?
Well, the first thing I did was get myself some Union Jack shoes.
Terrible idea. That's disgusting.
Yes. Well, they're more famous in Mid Bedfordshire than I am. They're more famous in Mid Bedfordshire than I am.
Really, they are. Well, I don't know if that's true, but yes, they'll be striking shoes. We must see them sometime.
I'm surprised you haven't seen them. They got in all the dailies.
Yes. Well, I'll put a picture up if you please send it to our Herd Immunity News Twitter. I'll put it up.
I will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The one thing I really admire about America is their national pride. Everybody swears allegiance to the flag. The stars and stripes flies everywhere. Everybody is proud of being an American. Sometimes I wonder why, but they're all proud of being American. And I really admire that about them. Yes. God bless America. Greatest country in the world.
God bless America. Yeah. After Britain, it is.
Obviously, second greatest country in the world.
Yeah.
So we've been told or taught, on the other hand, to be ashamed of our country, to be ashamed of our culture, our heritage, our history. Whereas history isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something maybe to learn from. But if you delete it, if you cancel it, if you erase it, then you are destined to repeat it. And I'm not saying that Britain's done everything right, but they were different times. We built an empire when the Spanish were building a similar empire, the Portuguese, the French. Everybody was out there grabbing what they could, and yet we turn around and judge our behavior by today's standards, which is unfair on a country that we shouldn't be penalizing ourselves. I'm very proud of the country. I'm proud of our flag. The George Cross should be flown with pride,
yes,
not with trepidation of being accused of something. But it's been associated And there's been, I often wonder who does these things, who releases. Every time they say, oh, no, you can't call, they change the words for something and say, oh, no, no, women are now cis women, for example. You think, who released that? Who said, right, we're going to do this, released it, and everyone latched onto it? There are umpteen examples, but somebody somewhere has this brilliant idea and releases it. And I want to know who. Who is it who decided to alienate the George Cross?
Well,
yeah.
Can I put it to you that the FCA are behind most of this? Those that control the money and those that control who can bank here have a say in absolutely every single function of not only government, but the way we live our lives. Now, things like diversity, inclusion, and equality, things like the critical race theory that we hear nonstop and the transgenderist movement, these are all the complete polar opposite of what the majority of Brits are interested in, how they want to go about their lives. And if it's not an attack and an assassination of Britishness, then what is it? And what would you do? And what Reform Party going to do to actually stamp this out? And do you want to stamp it
out? Yes. I mean, the big business is being driven by the diversity, equality, and inclusion thing.
Why?
I assume because it dilutes Britishness, it dilutes nationhood, it dilutes society, it dilutes culture. And I think for whatever, I don't understand why they want to dilute all those things, but I think that is the aim of the process. So you penalize big business for not jumping on board. So they're all getting, ticks for their diversion, inclusion, and all that kind of crap. And then that filters down because you get the do-goody percentage of the population who kind of latch onto it and think it's all wonderful and, I'm totally tolerant, so I'll go along with all of this. And then it's just another nibble at our culture. And then before you know it, we're not allowed to stand there with a flag of our country. Or people, the worst thing is when people question whether it's okay to wave a Union Jack or to wave a George Cross. Why should you have to question that in the country of the flag?
Only in an occupied country that's been conquered would you behave like this in general.
Yes.
When you're Winston Churchill, the statue to the man, controversial character, but at the end of the day, if he wasn't here and he didn't take the decisions being made, we might all be in camps or speaking German. But
in fairness, the English are so bad at learning languages. It's only been 70 years. We would never have learned German in that time frame.
We'd still be eating pork pies, and jellied ales, and haggis, and in the valleys, obviously leek and potato pie. I'm being facetious, but this constant wave, it gets on everybody's wick. But it's the young, it's the vulnerable minds, it's those that have that neuroelasticity, that those young brains are being attacked wave after wave. Up here in Scotland, they had posters of Nicola Sturgeon put in front of tiny children. So not only are they getting drag queens teaching them that it's okay to be a girl and it's okay to be a boy. If you're a boy, you can be a girl. If you're a girl, you can be a boy at 5 and 6. But they're also putting up pictures of Nicola Sturgeon. I mean, this must do untold damage to tiny minds. I'm in my 50s, and if I see a picture of Nicola Sturgeon, Dave, I need to go and lie down.
Yes, I quite understand. And it all starts with, as you say, the civil service and education. And I think our education system has been infiltrated since the 70s. Back in the 70s, the majority of professors in universities were centre-right. Now, the majority, I mean, by the late 80s, the majority were centre-left. Those people who went to university in the 80s are now the ones in the positions of power making the decisions, having had what amounts to left-wing education. So it's no wonder that all these policies are being pushed with such vigor and all the changes happening now, because that's how a whole generation have been taught.
Indeed, and it seems to be a reverse ferret on everything. That people from the left used to argue for free speech. Now they want to close down free speech. People from the left used to look at things like integration and supporting the arts and introducing those kind of things into school so they could give them a balance in their life. The left used to support working Brits. Now they want to import everybody. The right wing now seem to be the people who stand for free speech. They stand for British workers' rights and opportunities. And do you see more of a groundswell from the public, not the media and not the political class, not the uni party? Do you see a shift towards the right, or am I just being hopeful?
No, I certainly felt it on the doorstep during the by-election campaign. A lot of people seem aligned with our ideas, our principles, and our objectives. It's convincing them that their vote will be worthwhile doing so is the step change. As you say, things seem to have swapped over. Labour no longer represent the working man. I think if anybody, Reform represent working men more than any other party. Quite where it's all going to, how it's all going to boil out, I guess we'll see in the next few months.
Talking of boiling out, sorry to jump in, but I want to ask you this question before we wrap up. We've been chatting for nearly an hour now, and this is what happens when you chat to someone you're really enjoying the interview. It just goes so quick. Can I get your thoughts on net zero, and in particular to the addiction of net zero on the ULEZ situation that we see that's going to go throughout the whole country? I mean, Angela Rayner let the cat out of the bag on Sky when she said that net zero is going to be rolled out if Labour get in. What are your thoughts on net zero and where it's going right now?
The climate has always changed. That rules me out from being a climate denier. Get that over and done with. I'm not a climate change denier.
Right.
It has changed for millions of years. If you take a small little data set from the last 250 years, then the global temperature has gone up and the CO2 level has gone up. But when you then say to people, okay, well, the CO2 level was 8 times higher 2,000 years ago during Roman times, and they all walked around in togas in Britain because it was quite warm, and they grew grapes as far north as York, but we didn't burn any fossil fuels. Nobody seems to argue that. That was the weather. That wasn't climate. That seems to be the only opt-out they've got for data that doesn't correlate with their, agenda. So there's an anti-fossil fuel or an anti-oil debate going on. Oil is the second most abundant liquid on Earth, as far as I'm aware. And it seems to self-replenish to a certain extent. The fact that it's not, there's also an argument that it's not even a fossil fuel. That was named many years ago to imply scarcity and thus value. So for the most part, net zero is a push by large corporates with vested interests to make a lot of money, and the governments with their mediocre leadership and lobbyists and advisors seem to be taking the path of least resistance, which is to follow those that shout loudest. I personally don't see how net zero isn't actually possible. It isn't achievable. It's net zero means net zero. They haven't defined it. They haven't said how, for the first time in history, mankind wants to stop the climate changing. And they're going to do that by taxing poor people more money and making our lives more inconvenient. It's just a money grab. And you've seen since COVID, the rich getting far richer, the poor getting poorer. And that is all we're witnessing. And there are some useful idiots encouraging it.
Yeah. And for example, we won't go down the Sadiq Khan rabbit hole, but it's just being used to fleece motorists where we've covered this story extensively on Herd Immunity News. We've gone down to the areas, we've seen where people are prepared to go to fight for their jobs, to keep a roof over their head, to keep their children fed. They're prepared to take action and direct action at that. And the same's happening in Birmingham, where 50,000 fines went unpaid. You've seen a couple of thousand drivers being given back their money because they had compliant cars, but they signed up to the auto pay system like good honest citizens, and the money was still taken out their account. The courts have let people down, Dave, and that they've refused to acknowledge that the information passed on from the Imperial College London by Sadiq Khan to get ULEZ activated was fraudulent, and it was bought and paid for. But when the courts let people down, when the officials let people down, it's very difficult for them not to behave a bit naughtily, a bit badly.
Yeah. But the legal system, our judiciary, is another area that needs.
Yeah, we'll do that another day.
Let's say reform. Yes.
Well, look, on the final, can I just give you thank you? You're an amazing guest. You're a great guest. You're a guy who knows a lot of things about a lot of subjects. I know your speciality is IT, information technology. We haven't even spoken about central banking digital currency because there's so many other subjects. Maybe another time we'll have you on, because this is a huge part of your field. But see, in the last minute or two, is there anything you'd like to say to your followers, your viewers, your listeners, our followers and viewers and listeners, just about where you and the Reform Party are heading on next year and how they can maybe get engaged if they decide to?
Yes. Here's what I'll say. Nothing changes until the British electorate change it. Nothing will change. If you keep voting for the same things, don't expect a different outcome. The Tories, Labour and the Lib Dems are all pro-immigration, pro-high tax, pro more of the same. If you want change, you've got to vote for it. It's as simple as that. We're presenting a costed, considered, viable alternative to the status quo that has let you down. The reason your house is colder, the reason you feel poorer, the reason everything's going to hell in a handcart is because of the voting decisions that we have all made over the last 25 years. It's time to change that. And until you change, nothing changes. That is the end of it.
That's brilliantly said. And another time we'll have you on to talk about all these points that you've raised. But I think you've encompassed it all in a nutshell. All that remains for me to say here at Herd Immunity News is Mr. David Holland from the Reform Party, candidate for the Mid Bedfordshire election, whenever that may be. Thank you very much, sir, for being on Herd Immunity News.
Thank you, Boz. Lovely seeing you as always. Merry Christmas to you.
And Merry Christmas to you as well.
Okay, bye.